Hello there, and welcome everybody to a Virtual Space Hero LinkedIn Live Afternoon. We are this week an hour later, and this is only because our guest, that I'm really happy he's still an early bird, connects at 6:30 his local time. So an hour earlier would have meant 5:30 for him, and I really felt bad proposing that. So thanks to all of you for being with us today to discuss how to build a meaningful brand. And I'm really happy because as a researcher, I have been looking the past 10 years into new ways of working. And there has been a long discussion going on purpose of work. And the number one thing that you find in almost every research, whether gender or whatever generation we're talking about, what is important when it comes to work values, it's having purpose, finding a purpose, and having a meaningful work. And therefore, I'm really super happy that after discussions about meaningful meetings, meaningful trainings that we had in the past month, and also how to create a meaningful connection in the virtual space, I am happy that today we're talking about how to create a meaningful brand. And what does that even mean? And with this, I'm super happy to open our Virtual Space Hero virtual doors for Paul Campillo, who is connecting from California. Hi there, Paul.
Hey, everybody. Greetings from California, Oakland, California.
Thank you so much, Paul, for connecting at that early time. Thanks again. But I assume you are sort of an early bird.
Well, I'm used to it. So the company I work for, Typeform, is based in Barcelona. And, I've been working this way probably for the last 5 years, 5+ years. So I'm kind of used to the 9-hour difference, but I don't want to get too used to it, right? So.
Indeed, we thought that you're going to be in the same geographic area so that we're going to have sort of a similar time zone at least. But anyways, thanks for being with us. And you already mentioned Typeform. I'm not sure if I told you beforehand, but I'm a huge fan of Typeform. So I'm using Typeform for company surveys. I'm using Video Ask on my webpage. And for all of you out there who still don't know what Typeform is offering, you definitely need to go to the webpage, typeform.com, videoask.com. And I can't recall now because I remember Shiva Rove, one of my colleagues here in Spain, she used an icebreaker video tool that Typeform brought to the market. I can't remember the name. There is another thing that I already used. But anyways, let us know, how did you come to Typeform, and how was your story to come to talk about meaningful brands?
All right. So that's a couple of things. So my background is in social work, and I was doing that for a while. I was working with reentry. Reentry is a fancy term for people who are coming out of prison, and my job was to help them not only just return to prison, but help them thrive. So I had to help them find jobs. So in a sense, you could say my job as a marketer began there, and my job was to help them present themselves in the best way to future employers. And so I was doing that for a while. We ran these workshops, and we're well connected here in the Bay Area. And our CEO had a meeting with Zynga and Pandora. Zynga is the creator of Farmville and Mafia Wars and all that. And everyone knows Pandora is the music streaming competitor to Spotify. And they said that we should use Typeform for our workshop surveys. And so the CEO came back to the office and she said, "Oh, Paul, they said that we should be using Typeform." And I said, "Okay, what's that?" And so I went to the laptop and typed it in. And I was like, "Oh, this looks really cool." And, I didn't think anything of it, but then I noticed there's this animated GIF or GIF in the corner, and said, "Come work in the sun." So I was like, "Okay, I want to work in the sun."
Sounds good.
Clicked on that. It took me to a job application. And so they had all these jobs, and one of them was like a content manager. And I said, "Oh, that sounds interesting." And I clicked on that and, started filling out the application. And then I realized it was going to take me 3 hours to fill it out because they were asking me, "Can you upload a blog post?" So I did that. Can you upload all the basics like your LinkedIn profile? Do you have a website? I happen to have a blog at the time. And the final one was, can you go to this web page, rewrite all the copy, use the inspector, rewrite all the copy, take screenshots, upload all the screenshots. And I did that. And I submitted it, and I was like, because I was getting used to Typeform, I was like, oh, this is a nice tool. I can get used to using this. And then I turned it in. I didn't think anything of it, just went back to work. And a week later, I got an email from the head of HR, and she said, oh, the CEO wants to talk to you. And I said, okay. so I got on a Skype call with the CEO, David, co-CEO, and the head of growth at the time. And we got into a conversation, and David said to me, he's like, yeah, that was one of the best submissions that we got. and he said, how did you do it? Because we looked at your LinkedIn profile, there's nothing but social work stuff there. And so we got into a long conversation, and these conversations kept continuing. And then 4 months later, I got hired. And I found myself going back and forth, traveling back and forth from Barcelona and the Bay Area, because I was the first remote employee. I was also the first marketer hired by Typeform. And we're talking very early days. So maybe about number 28 in the company. We're about 300 now. So that was 2015. Obviously, it's 2020. There's been a lot of growth in between then. How we came to Meaningful Brands was, more recently. We had just gone through version 2 of the product. We had just released a new brand identity. And when we released it, we didn't operationalize it. And so eventually I had a conversation with David, and David said, yeah, I'm thinking I want to redo the mission and vision of the company. Maybe you can work on the brand. And I said, okay, we can do that. So we had just paid some high-priced consultants to do this for us earlier. And I guess David wasn't satisfied with the results. I could say that I wasn't really too satisfied. I mean, there were some good things, but there wasn't, it didn't feel like it was us. I guess that's the point. And so we got to work, worked on a new mission, worked on a new vision, and worked on a new brand promise, which is basically the words that penetrates through the entire organization, that everyone thinks from this point of view. And we presented it. I presented it to the marketing team. They really loved it. And then I eventually presented it to the leadership team. They loved it too. And I think Robert and David, who are co-CEOs, co-founders of the company, just looked at me and said, you nailed it. And so that phrase was, every interaction counts. And that's kind of what we live by within the company. And that paved the way for our new mission and vision. So our mission is to inspire brands to have meaningful conversations at scale. And that's basically what our tool does.
Let me immediately ask you, so how did you, as Typeform, or as a marketing brand manager for Typeform, come up with the sort of vision that you want to inspire other brands to become more meaningful? So what is it that drives you as a person, but also as a company, to be meaningful?
I don't know what drives me as a person. I think it's always kind of been this way for me. I think I realized early on that something wasn't right about the way the world worked, and I'm talking way back to high school, and I realized that why am I going to school? Why am I doing all these different things if it's not leading to, I don't know, me making more money or to a better future? And it was kind of this exploration that where I kind of realized that it is all about meaning in the end. And I kind of got into Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and realized that how Viktor frames it in the book, he basically says that meaning is something that happens outside of you, right? And it always has something to do with other people or this mission you have to fulfill. And what he found in the concentration camps, which is, the story of the book, is how he survived the concentration camps. And I believe it was Auschwitz. That he said that the people who suffered with meaning were more likely to survive. So he said the difference between hope and despair was basically meaning. and attaching meaning to something. So the people who had hope had this idea, well, I need to get back to my family, and I need to tell the story and let people know like what happened here so it never happens again. Or I have this work, I have this vision of this company I want to build, or I have this book I want to write, or whatever the case. And that kept them going. And so I realized how critical it was to have this in our life. And so that kind of stuck with me as I was in social work. And of course, when in business, you think, well, why can't it be here too? Why can't we have this, as you said earlier, the shared purpose and the thing that brings us all together, the thing that unifies us. And of course, Simon Sinek's work, Start With Why. I mean, I could talk about that. It's the third most watched TED Talk of all time. And how critical it was. And that was actually Simon's framework. If you haven't seen his TED Talk, I'd recommend you go watch it. I think it's called How Leaders Inspire Action. I forget what it's called.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody should see the Simon's TED Talk or the Golden Circle. Think about that. And also, we are using it, for example, within our trainings, but also for ourselves, because it helps you also to step a step back and think about why are you doing what you're doing and how you're doing that, of course.
Yeah, and that was the actual framework that we used to rebrand Typeform and to come up with this phrase of every interaction counts. So if you think of the golden circle, there's the why, the how, and the what. And the what is, I don't know, forms and surveys. You can say that's the basic of what we sell. The how, the thing that makes us different, is that we created the first conversational forms and surveys. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that's what's important to us. And then the why, it took a while to nail down the why. And it really came down to our founders, and it also came down to our customers. And you got to know who your customers are when you're trying to create a brand. You just can't do this in a vacuum. But I had done a bunch of research around customers. But anyway, the word that we came up with was care, because we realized that Robert really cared about the company and the human experience of the company. And David really cared about the product experience, or the respondent experience, the user experience as a whole. And so you could almost say it wasn't care, it was obsession. Or, you know what I mean? Like they really went, like every detail mattered, like everything, like every pixel had its place to that point. And so we just used this and said, okay, well, that's our why. Now, how does that translate into a phrase? And that took a little bit of time, but eventually we got there and came up with every interaction counts. You might not see this everywhere, but this is what's inside the whole organization that leads us to this meaningful world that we want to create.
It's super interesting because Typeform as a survey tool calls your attention immediately, because it's so different to all the other tools that are out there. And imagine the last time a friend showed me a micro learning course where they used Typeform as a tool, because they were able to upload small videos in between and then had again a multiple choice quiz. And it was sort of a learning journey they created through a Typeform. And I was like, just like, wow, one product, but like so many different, because if I can do that with a Typeform, it's like, dear God, there must be no end to our creativity.
Right. And so you just brought up a key word, and I'm going to tweak it a little bit. So different is the key to building a brand. You got to be different. And that was the saying for so long. You need differentiation. You should start with differentiation. You should figure out like how you stand out in the market and figure out what that is and position yourself accordingly. But now today, I would say difference is more important than different. So what difference do you make in the lives of people? And so when we start thinking about meaningful brands, there's three things. There's the functional thing that you deliver to people, right? The product, the service, whatever it is that you build. And that has to work. And that's your user experience. The next thing is the personal benefits that people get. And so now we're starting to think of, how do I help this human being become a better human being? How do I help this professional become a better professional or better marketer or things like that? And you could do that through content. So the first one is functional benefits. So you could say that's UX. The second one is personal benefits. I would call that HX. So we coined this term within Typeform, human experience. So it's something that goes beyond UX to HX. And then the final one is the collective benefit. What are we doing in society? How are we making the world a better place? And this is what's different about how we're approaching this meaningful brand philosophy, is now we're starting to think, okay, so we need to do something beyond just earn a profit and just, be one of the many companies that are doing well, but not necessarily giving back in a very intentional way. And so that's the difference now. So we're getting ready to hire a head of social impact. This person is going to, work on campaigns and think of things that we can do in the world. It's not like we haven't done some things. For example, when COVID hit, we did the Kindness is Contagious campaign, where we gave away our tool for free to anyone that was working on COVID related projects. And so that was really important to us. But then there was other things that came up too, and we didn't really necessarily have a response to it right away, like all the protests that are happening, like the Black Lives Matter stuff, or I think there's social protests or social activism happening in over 40 different countries. So there's a lot of unrest in a lot of different places. And the thing is, what's the thing that brings all those elements together, and how can we address it? So these are questions that we're thinking about now. But those are the three things: functional benefits, personal benefits, and collective benefits. And we believe that if we can hit all three, then we can start becoming a more meaningful brand. And this is super important for us.
Mm-hmm. Totally understand that. And we are getting 2 comments. So Jack is saying hello there, and I assume Jack is connecting from Costa Rica. So thanks a lot, Jack. And we also have a comment on Typeform's product design and user experience. As a designer and entrepreneur, I found the company very inspiring. Thanks for your amazing work. So there are people out there who, of course, are truly inspired by probably also the different design approach that you as a company have that inspires their own work. So thanks a lot. And for all of you out there, we are just starting the conversation. We're still here for half an hour. So just put into the comment sections your questions, your comments, or your thoughts on how you might be using Typeform. Paul, let me ask you another question. So you were mentioning that the human experience, HX, in Typeform. And I also think that is a little bit, also, if I think about Video Ask, for example, which is a tool for those who have not seen it yet, but you could go to my webpage and you see a beautiful video ask recorded by myself. That is a small sort of icon in the left and the right lower part of your webpage, where you can have like a video message to your customers, to whoever is visiting your webpage, right? And people can leave also back a video message or an audio message, and so on and so forth. And I also think that this is sort of a genius idea on how you connect differently through a simple web page, a service or a company with customers or potential employees as well, right?
Yeah. So yeah, we see all the tools that we build as conversational tools, right? And so that's really important for us, because we believe that conversations are the foundation for every great business. We have this saying in the company that the most important interaction is the exchange of information. Nothing happens in business until information is exchanged. And it's not like you can't use something else, like another form tool or survey tool or whatever the case is. But we just want to make sure that it represents you, and it represents your voice as much as possible, or represents your brand. And so that's kind of what you're seeing, this evolution of interfaces that we're creating. And I could say too that we are an interface company. That's what we do. We try to build the best interfaces that interact between brands and their communities, and that's super important for us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think this is something that you feel when you look at your product. But let me ask you a question now. So you're talking about a meaningful brand. You already mentioned a few pillars that are important to create a meaningful brand. What else do need entrepreneurs or CEOs, company owners, or marketers think about when we talk about meaningful brands? So how do you know that your brand is meaningful? For example, just a very seems stupid question, but I think it's a big one.
No,
how do you know that it's really meaningful?
Yeah, it's important. So we feel like we're at the beginning of this journey. Like, a lot of people might know about Typeform, but might not say Typeform is meaningful to them. And we realized that. And, I got the latest data from a survey we just ran. I would have to look it up to tell you, but we're showing pretty well. But I mean, we're not the awareness of SurveyMonkey. But you definitely have to measure it, but I think before you get out there and measure it, you have to understand what a brand is. And I think this is where people have a little bit of problem. So it's hard for people. They might see it as abstract or whatever. But the bottom line is that the brand is something that exists outside of you. And so if there are 7 billion people on the planet, well, then there's 7 billion worldviews, and there's 7 billion ideas on who you are, right? Potentially. And whatever they think and whatever they feel is your brand, not what you think and not what you say. Sure, you want to influence it. You're trying to position your company. You're trying to position your product. You're trying to position yourself or whatever. But it's what other people say about you. That's where your brand resides.
Mhm.
So another way to look at it is that all the work that you do is a market stimulus, right? You're trying to stimulate people to think a certain way. The response, the market response is where your brand resides. and that's a key distinction. I just want people to understand that. And so it's what other people think. As Jeff Bezos says, a brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room, right? Seth Godin says that it's a promise, and it's a promise that exists in the mind of the customer. So the promise, like, oh, I see that the promise is going to be this. Like if I buy a Volvo, it's going to provide me with safety or whatever the case is. And so in Typeform, we say a brand is a story that sticks about the difference that you make.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very important that we get clear, like that's what a brand is. And then I would go one step further and say, I don't really do branding. My work is about positioning, right? And so I'm always trying to position the company. I'm trying to position the products. I'm trying to position individual employees or whatever the case is. And then hopefully that story that I'm trying to craft around them, or, it also translates to the market. And then we have like this same idea that we carry. And so that's number one. So once we're able to do that, then we can start sending out our surveys. We can start measuring. We can ask, the general market, hey, have you been exposed to Typeform? What do you think about it? Hey, when you think about meaningful brands, do you think about Typeform, or do you think about this, or whatever the questions are that we ask, and we try to get that data, and so that becomes our baseline. And then we think, okay, maybe we have to run more campaigns, or maybe we have to talk about it more, or maybe we have to put it more front and center and put it on our content, or whatever the case is. But I don't know if that makes it a little more clear about how we think about it, but I think, people always think that
philosophical, isn't it? It's like a little bit much more than just a definition. When I listen to you, it sounds like much more like a worldview and a philosophical approach on how we see our own organization to some extent.
Yeah, and you got to be able to express that to the world, right? So you see things a certain way, and it's true. It's a certain point of view that you have. But make no mistake, you could have that worldview, and your product doesn't, support that worldview, right? Mm-hmm. So now you have a conflict. You have a crappy product, but you have a great idea what you could be, and and people only remember the product, and so that's your brand. Right. And a brand is really about the difference that you make in people's lives. And that difference can be positive or negative. And that's very critical to understand. Yeah.
And when you talk about building the brand, also thinking about your employees, because the ones like the catalysts or like the ambassadors on about your brand image, they are your employees. And your employees now, as we are all working only virtually. So how do you make them feel what it means to be part of Typeform? Because that's also, of course, as a virtual space hero, I always look at the virtual space, and I want to understand how whatever we're talking about is affected by the virtual space, or what we can do to make the experience better or different. So how does the question would be how is Typeform affected by virtual work, and how do you deal with this aspect within your own company?
Yeah, so this is a challenge for everybody, and I'm glad there are people out there like you that are addressing this, and trying to get people to be more conscientious about how they're engaging and interacting in a remote distributed work environment. For us, it's the same. People aren't used to not being around each other, and then add on top of the fact that a lot of these places, these cities are shutting down, and that creates this very difficult space to deal with, as far as I don't know, the sense that there's no boundaries between your work and your life and all this other stuff. How we're dealing with it is, first, we're acknowledging that it's a big problem. What we try to do, at least in Barcelona, is open up our offices a little bit at a time for a little bit of the people, so that people can get some exposure to other people, especially the people who are struggling. There are things that we were doing, to, let's say we launched a new meaningful initiative. We tried to, for example, we asked the entire company to just come up with a phrase that's meaningful to you. And people shared this phrase with us, and we collected all the responses. Then we turned those phrases into a t-shirt, and we sent everyone a t-shirt, and so that's one of the ways that we're trying to engage people, because you're right. You absolutely cannot build a meaningful brand if your staff or your employees or your team is not fully bought into the vision and sees the world, at least maybe not sees the world the same as you, but is trying to create the world that you want to create, right? And I think that's the key. So we do certain things, like we'll send everyone those t-shirts, or we'll send them a care package, or we'll send them, it might be just random. I just got a package for Halloween, and I should read you the note, but I probably can't find it. But it was a really good and nice gesture from the company that, it's been a difficult year for everybody. So these are like little things that we can do. We've also changed how we approach each other during, remote work. Some people are having like beers. Yesterday I was on a San Francisco call, and people were just talking about food the whole time. It's just a place for people to gather and to share ideas, or to talk about, I think the week before was politics, right? So everyone was talking about the election and, how they felt. And this is before the results were known. So people were like stressed and, just kind of getting out their feelings. So it could be a powerful medium, but nothing's more powerful than obviously being in person. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
I think the examples you're providing us with are like super nice, small examples on what we do, what we are still able to do, even if we're in a virtual space and not physically connected to each other. So just remember, and that has for me to do a lot with purpose and meaning, also on how the company is interpreting their role in such a difficult period of time. Because I remember a friend of mine, Dr. Markus Ebner, he's a positive leadership expert. We did a very big event in June together, a virtual event, and he gave one small example on his first positive leadership virtual workshop that he was also not sure how that's going to be. But what HR, for example, did, because they knew that people are hesitant, they knew that people were not sure about the virtual thing in general. And what they did is they also sent out connection packages for all the participants of those trainings with a special note for each of them. So it was like really a super nice gesture that they were doing, also to create a connection already before the training even started. So I don't know if there was a mug inside or chocolate or whatever. There was something that people could connect, even though they are not physically connected.
Yeah, it doesn't take much. Again, it's a simple acknowledgement. Sometimes it's just, I see you, and, and I hear you. And it's just spending some time, an extra minute or so, or 5 minutes, or sometimes 20 minutes with a team member, and just kind of letting them talk and, share what's on their mind. Or it's just a note, or it's just an email saying, thank you for being here with us. I know it's been difficult, but yeah, it doesn't take much. I think what your point is, that there has to be some sincerity there. It has to come from an authentic place. Again, it has to come from that place of, this is what it means to be in this company. This is what it means. This is what it means to be a Typeformer. And
Absolutely.
so that's critical.
Let me pick up, Paul, on one question that we're getting there. So, Abril is asking, when trying to differentiate from others, this could involve taking risks that could compromise your brand. How do you think this should be approached?
So yeah, the risks are only going to be, I don't know. I don't know if it's an unknown risk to you, but the more you know your customer, the easier it is to take those risks. And I can give you a quick example. Um, in 2018, Nike had Colin Kaepernick on their roster of athletes. Colin Kaepernick was not playing any football, and he wasn't playing because he was basically blackballed from the NFL. And he took the controversial stance that, Black Lives Matter more than my career. And when he refused to stand up for the national anthem, people were like, well, he's dead to me. Even his own fans started burning his jerseys. But Nike had the 20th anniversary or 30th anniversary of the Just Do It campaign in 2018. And they were trying to decide who's going to be the face of this campaign. And the ad agency said, well, let's make Colin Kaepernick the face, right? Because we understand who our client is. It's going to be the urban youth. It's not going to be the 40-year-old, 50-year-old white guy that wears Nikes. And the Nike executives, when they first heard this, were like, no, we absolutely don't want to do that. It's too controversial. He's a controversial figure. Anyway, they went back and forth, and they obviously decided to do it. Now, when that first came out, obviously it was a risk. When it first came out, people were burning Nikes on social media. They were burning the shoes everywhere. And the CEO said, we got record engagement with our brand. The stock price went down. Everything happened. 3 weeks later, 3 weeks after they launched that campaign, $6 billion in earned media, $6 billion. Their stock hit an all-time high. And I think this comes down to one thing. How well do you know your customers? And who are you really, who's your real customer? Who's your super user? And if you know them well enough, then you also know how far you can go with them, right? And what risks you can take and why it makes sense. And why it makes sense to pick someone like Colin Kaepernick to represent your brand, even as controversial as he is, because it's going to be the urban youth that are really putting the strength and their efforts and support behind your brand. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Does that help?
Let's ask that out there. If it was clear, fantastic. If not, just type into the comments function your update, your other questions, and we're going to address them in the next 5 minutes, because we have 5 minutes left. Oh no, we have 10 minutes left. Sorry. Enough time.
Yeah. So the point is that if you know your customer well enough, you can take calculated risks like that. And if you don't,
that sounds very clear.
Yeah, if you don't, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, and for whoever joined late, because I see a few joined late, so there is no problem. You have access to the recording, because this live stream link is the same as where you can find the recording. So don't worry about the first 30 minutes. Just engage now with us in the conversation. Paul, when we were talking beforehand, you were also mentioning at conversations at scale. So meaningful conversations at scale. And that's also sort of the title from our LinkedIn Live today. What do you exactly mean with meaningful conversations at scale, and how do you build them?
Okay, so the way we see any interaction that happens between a brand and its customers or its community. I say community because it could be your customers. And I think you pointed out earlier, it could be your employees. It could be stakeholders. It could be the general market. Doesn't matter. Our tool is used to have those conversations at scale. Now, I'd prefer that you have the conversations like this, right? That you don't have to use our product, but obviously that's not the case, especially when business is transversal and, it's global and you're dealing with people in different time zones. It's important to have that asynchronous thing. So when I say meaningful, so when we came up with this whole concept, we also came up with the concept of meaningful design. And meaningful design is 4 things for us. And we want to make sure that every conversation follows these 4 elements. The first one is beautiful, because it's not so much that the tool is beautiful, it's that it represents you. That we want our tools to best represent who you are as a professional or who you are as a person. or as a brand. So that's number one: beautiful design, beautiful representation, that whole thing. The second thing is personal. So who am I talking to? Do I know who I'm talking to, right? And being able to have these elements built into the platform so that I can greet you by name and, not call you, hey, person, can you fill out this survey? No, there should be some personal aspect there. And those are things, elements, or that's a dimension we're trying to improve always. The third one is contextual. Where is this person? Where are we having this conversation? Is it on a laptop? Is it on a desktop? Is it on a mobile device? What's happening? Where are you from? Are you in Oakland? Are you in Switzerland? Whatever the case is, right? All these things tell you more about the context, what language are you using, things like that. There's a lot of room for growth there. And, not all these elements are 100% in our product. I see it as a progress bar for each of these elements. And the fourth one is relevance. So I might know who you are. I might know where you're from. I might know what device you're on. I might understand all these things and build like the greatest experience for that. But if I don't have a relevant conversation with you, then what's the point? If you're over here talking about the soup and I'm talking about salads, or if you're talking about cats and I want to talk about dogs, then we have a problem. And that's kind of, if you're familiar with Typeform, then we use logic to script out these conversations, and you can do that with video ask as well. And so that's these are the four elements of meaningful design. And
I think it's so interesting.
Lots of work there.
I totally can understand that, because I'm just putting it into a slightly different context. We're talking about meaningful design of brands or conversations, and I'm just thinking about meaningful design of meetings or trainings or events as well, because beautiful, personal, contextual, and as well relevant, right, of course, applies to so many different contexts for whatever we're talking about. And I think that's like crucial also in this aspect.
Yeah, and it's something that we thought about, and it's also something that it's not something we want to keep to ourselves, and we definitely want to share with the world, and we want the world to think in this way. We want the world, or brands or businesses, to have more personal relationships in the end, and you can't really get to that place of personal relationships until you have meaningful conversations, right? And so that's where everything begins for us.
Absolutely. And it's fun that you're picking up on relationships or personal questions, because we have one question here that is really fun that totally connects to your statement now. So what would be for you, Paul, an example of a meaningful question with someone you've just met? What would be an example of a meaningful question?
So I created a t-shirt not too long ago, and so it looks like a Typeform. So it's a question and there's a cursor, and then at the bottom it says powered by Typeform. But the question is, you have 90 days left to live. What do you do with your time? How do you spend those 90 days? And that's the question I want to ask. This is also an idea that we're floating around in the company right now. It's like, okay, we want to do the next iteration of our t-shirts. That before we asked them for a meaningful phrase to put on their shirts, and now it's like to fit more in line with Typeform's brand. We want people to ask a question that's meaningful for other people, right? And so that would be the question I would ask. I actually asked myself that question before, and I said, well, if I have 90 days left to live, then I want to go live in New York for a little bit. And what I did is I got an apartment in New York. I spent 3 weeks there, but I wanted to feel like I was living there. And a lot of people felt like, oh, you're more like an East Coast guy. You should probably go to the East Coast. And I just had to see for myself. I really loved it. It was amazing.
It sounds fantastic. So I see there, oh my God, what a good question. So people are inspired. So let us know out there. We're still going to be online for 3 minutes, and we would love to know, if you had 90 days left, how would you spend them? So let us know in the chat window, how would you spend those 90 days? I'd love to hear that, really. And Paul, so you went to New York, you rented an apartment in New York. If I had asked you the question now, if you had 90 days left, what would you be doing?
That's a good question.
What would you answer?
I would probably leave Typeform and finish writing my book.
So we're also waiting a book of yours.
What was that?
We are also waiting that a book is being published soon. That's really cool.
I'm writing it. I'm in the middle of writing it. So
that is fantastic. Well, and not to be missed, because Paul is not only a writer, but he's also a podcaster. So at this point, if you look at the description of this LinkedIn Live, you find Paul's LinkedIn profile. So connect with him, check him out, check out his podcast. It's really amazing, because also the podcast, in my opinion, we just briefly talked about it before, has a very different design, I might say, or structure, and I'm very much looking forward to continue listening to it and to get some inspiration about meaningful conversations. And with that, I'd really want to thank you, Paul. It was amazing having you here.
Great being here.
I think I'll definitely take with me away the 4 principles. I'm just repeating them, repetition is always like learning in the moment. So we have beautiful, personal, contextual, and the 4th one is relevance.
Yeah.
And if we talk about meaningful brands or conversations at scale, if we talk about meaningful meetings, if we talk about meaningful virtual training, I think that applies really in many different contexts. And for me, that's like, whoa, how do you say, the top on the cherry? No, it's the cherry on the top of the cake. Top of the cherry.
Cherry on top, as we say.
That's it. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks everyone out there for watching, for your comments and for your questions. Paul, I sort of have prepared a virtual cocktail backstage, sort of.
I'm going to see you back there. Yeah.
I'm going to see you right there. And I say again, thank you. Muchas gracias. Yeah, we're seeing that your company is Spanish-based from Barcelona. And I see you in a few minutes.
Okay, see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. I really feel inspired always when we talk about meaning in whatever context it is, particularly meaning in the virtual space, because we do know that it is harder to connect. With that, we have on our blog a few blog articles about meaningful meetings, about meaningful virtual trainings, and I really encourage you to check them out. There were tremendous conversations in the past weeks. What is coming up? So next week is the 20th, and we're going to have indeed 2 LinkedIn Lives, but 2 totally different time zones. So in the afternoon, I have with me again Kazila Bori from the United States, and we're talking about virtual events production in the afternoon. And then we are moving to a totally different time zone. So at 11 Spanish time, Madrid time, we're going to connect with Latin America, and we're going to talk about trabajo remoto, so remote work. And I have with me Tarsila Shino, who is a remote working expert. She also founded Trabajo Remoto Latam, a group of people who are engaged in remote work conversations. And I have with me Pamela Pita from Telefónica Ecuador. She also just recently was nominated from the World Women's Forum as one of the inspiring role models. And I'm very much looking forward to having them with me, and also Xavi Barachina, who is connecting with me at 11 hours Spanish time. So join our conversation. Those of you que están conectados desde Latinoamérica, estoy realmente contenta porque vamos a tener una tremenda conversación, un tremendo debate entre los 4, y espero que les voy a ver o en la tarde para hablar sobre virtual events o en la noche para hablar sobre trabajo remoto en Latinoamérica. Y con esto, bueno, I wish you a wonderful afternoon. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, please spread the word so that people know Friday afternoon is virtual space here at LinkedIn Lifetime. And with that, I'm saying muchísimas gracias y nos vemos pronto. Thank you very much and see you very soon.